Hi there, I'm Steven, and today I'm talking with Michelle Thompson, Onfleet's Director of People Operations, about herself, her job, and the culture she's helping to foster at Onfleet.
My name is Michelle Thompson. I am basically human resources with a little bit of flair, covering compensation, benefits, performance reviews. But in addition to that, making sure that the organization is running smoothly in terms of culture, morale, making sure that team members have the right resources to do their jobs as well as connect to their coworkers, all of those things that come along with an employee's experience as an employee at Onfleet.
Tell me a little bit more, if you would, about how you got into this field and sort of how you arrived at Onfleet.
I didn't start in human resources. I started out as an executive assistant, but in roles where I was the single point of contact for all employees to, say, a managing director or a senior level partner or a CEO. So with that comes along a lot of connection to human resources, especially in larger companies where the organization is distributed, you have multiple offices. So having someone on the ground where employees can connect to, ask questions, liaison between the bigger picture of corporate human resources and that particular satellite office is where I started. So as I started to move along in my career, I realized that I enjoyed HR more than being an executive assistant because it allowed me to support more than one person. I love helping everybody, and so the progression was natural for me to move from being an EA into human resources to spread the love across the organization.
Those types of roles seem like they require a lot of patience and the ability to juggle a whole lot of things at once. Would you say that's your experience?
Yes. And especially in, moving from corporate to startup, you don't realize the amount of extra responsibility, multiple hats that you'll be wearing. So my first transition from a large conglomerate organization to a small startup that had just a handful of team members kind of was a shock to me at first, but I did realize that it allowed me to shine in other areas that I hadn't been able to previously. So that really kind of warmed my heart in terms of being able to let go a little bit and really support in areas that I loved but didn't realize I loved because I was, not able to do that in the corporate setting. So that's when I, decided that startup was the place that I wanted to be and really wear those multiple hats and hone all types of different skill sets that you don't get to do in a larger organization.
What in particular are some of the things that appealed to you about startups versus a larger company?
I do enjoy the smaller teams. I do enjoy being able to be scrappy from the ground up and not have to step in someone else's shoes to do the work. Really being strategic and having an open mind and creative around what we can do and figure out how it works for everybody and not just a single group of people. Startup allows teams to spread their wings a little bit and step into roles that they didn't even realize they enjoyed and allow their superpowers to come out in a way that you don't get to do that as much in a larger corporate arena because there are so many people and there are so many things and people, usually want you to focus on this particular skill set, whereas in a startup, it's just so many things that have to get done and not enough people to do it. So it can be chaotic sometimes, but a lot of times it's so much fun because you're learning new things and you're figuring new things out and you're being creative and allowing others to have a voice.
Personally, I'm not cut out for that, but I'm glad that some people are. So tell me about how you kind of got hooked up with Onfleet specifically.
In the onset of the start of COVID, every, organization was going through something they hadn't experienced before. And I, was laid off during those times. A lot of people don't realize is that the amount of talent that was now available looking for jobs was massive. Usually there's a good amount of people looking for a role, but during COVID, so many people were being laid off. The amount of talent that was out in the pools for the small amount of jobs that people were posting, it was crazy. So being able to have Onfleet find my needle in the haystack was something amazing. And so it was just a regular post through LinkedIn, I believe. And once we connected and got started, they were looking for their first HR hire. Previously, they had people in split roles where it was an operations person kind of helping with HR, but it was time for them to look at this role as a significant part of the growth of the organization. And so starting to talk to them kind of gave me a sense of worth again. In some ways, I was struggling with being defeated around, oh my God, am I ever going to find a new job again? They came through in terms of having conversations around transparency. I think the thing about Onfleet that really took me over the top was I asked the interview panel a question around, okay, what are you looking for in this role? What is it that you want this role to be? And their response to me was, we don't know. We need you or someone like you to tell us what our organization needs when it comes to HR or people operations. That to me gave a open, transparent answer that not all small startups or leaderships are willing to admit that they don't know something. It's always about we have all the answers, and they were like, we don't know. That's why we're looking to hire this role. We need someone with experience and background, things like that, to come in and show us and guide us in the way that we need to be guided as we scale and grow and support our team in the right way.
Doing all of that in the midst of a pandemic where, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that you and pretty much everyone else are almost entirely remote?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Tell me how that's gone.
I have to say that even though they were at a point where they're like, we're really not sure, they had great ideas in place. They just needed somebody to come in and own what that looks like and kind of build a structure around that and really kind of guide employees a little bit more and say, okay, here's what you should expect. So setting some expectation. But for me, I think that was the part that I love the most, having so much to come into and really, my plate is already full the day I start. I am busy. I, get to, kind of create some things from scratch. And what does that look like? So it was great for me. And I think it was the best fit for both of us, really, in terms of somebody who wanted to do something of that nature and really help the growth of the organization.
Can you just describe for me what kind of culture you found when you started and just kind of how you would characterize the culture at Onfleet in general?
Yeah, I'd say culture that was there when I started was very welcoming, open arms. The team, even though fairly small at the time, was open-minded to the point where they were so excited that HR was coming. That's very rare. Most people are like, oh my God, here comes HR. There's going to be a lot of politics. There's going to be a lot of this and that. That was completely the opposite for Onfleet. The team was hungry for a little bit of structure. They were hungry for some ideas around what we can do with our growth and how we can continue to build on the foundation of the culture that the founders had already built, in terms of being transparent and having great communication and really allowing our team members to have the autonomy to make decisions and have a voice in how things were working. So the culture was already there. All they needed was, again, someone to kind of really come in and own it, to continue to build on what they had already started. One thing that we do, I think, a little differently than other organizations is during our interview process. One of our interview panels is specifically focused on values, diversity, and culture. We don't talk about skill set. We don't talk about any of that. We kind of dig deep into the personality of the candidate to really give everybody a sense of, will they be a really good addition to what our culture is now, what we're looking for, what's important to us as an organization. So it's big for us, and especially in this current situation, where we are completely distributed. We have to take those extra steps because you don't get that body language. You miss those ad hoc conversations in the office. So you do have to take extra steps in this environment to be sure about the candidates that you're bringing into the fold.
You mentioned, that there was a lot of opportunity for you to get creative, really. What are a few things that you've created at Onfleet that you're proud of?
Yeah, that one thing that I was just mentioning about the interview process. Initially, they did not have a recruiting team, so I built a recruiting team and a recruiting process. In addition to that, I'm really proud of creating a performance management program that is consistent. So before they were doing an annual review, and now we do quarterly reviews once a year is not the best plan of action for any organization. And so being able to have those things more often is important. And then, in terms of like keeping us connected. So previously you would do team building where people would get together in the office and those kind of things. And trying to continue to do that during this pandemic has been a challenge. That is one of my biggest challenges is really, making sure we do that. But, we've done things like we've had movie day where we just, take a day to stream movies. People pick what movies they want to watch. Tomorrow we're having a scavenger hunt. So when I think of those types of social events, I try to think of things that where we, whatever time we're going to spend, it's going to be quality. We're going to have fun doing it. We are going to connect in a way that we don't get to on a normal basis. So I try to think through what that looks like. So yeah, one of the things that I implemented is a system where, we use Slack as our internal communication tool. And we utilize Slack to do a thing where the bot throws together a random group of people. You'll get a time to have an emulated water cooler conversation. Basically, you get grouped together with a different group of people, not just people from your team, but across the entire company. And there's one rule. You are forbidden to talk about work. So this 30 minutes every week for several different groups of people allows them to get to know their coworkers on a different level. It allows them to kind of just take a couple deep breaths, kind of connect and understand what's important to them. Do they have families? Do they have kids? How are they handling the situation? What are things that they do on the weekend? Those kind of things that we miss out on when you're not in the office, walking into the kitchen, seeing somebody standing there and you strike up this random conversation. So we try to do that in the weekly coffee chats. So yeah, there's been quite a few programs that I've kind of launched since starting. I think it's been received pretty well by the organization.
Yeah, I mean, tell me a little bit more about your life outside of work. Yeah, what takes up your time when you're not focusing on everything that we've talked about so far?
Oh my God, there used to be so much, and now it's not as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So prior to COVID, I was an avid softball player, and my husband and I are really into sports, and we would go to basketball games and do all of those kinds of things that we miss out on now. Go to the gym 3-4 times a week. Really kind of connect to my gym friends. You call those your gym friends, your gym family, or whatever. But now it's more about staying connected with the family, checking in on everybody, making sure things are happening. We don't get to do as much of the outdoor experiences that we used to. I do miss a lot of that. Now we just kind of take a drive. In order for us to get out of the house, we can only do so much. So we take a drive here or there or do those kinds of things. But I spend a lot of time with my family. We're really close, very, very close. I have 2 adult children. And so we spend a lot of time with them. So that's pretty much it for the most part. I tend to enjoy my job a little too much. So a lot of my spare time is spent thinking about, just what you were asking me, thinking about ways I could do some social events. And I used to be a wedding planner for many years. And so that part of me kind of kicks in when I'm trying to think of what those social events should be and how can we keep the team happy and organized and connected in a way that's not just about work. You got to think of holistically keeping employees happy. And that's not just about their job. It's really about the human side of them and what, makes them happy and how can you kind of connect to that in some ways.
That's interesting. Are there any specific lessons from wedding planning that you find yourself sort of thinking back to in your current role? Or how do you think that informed what you do now?
Patience. You learn a lot of patience and it comes in really handy. Yeah. Not just that, but I think the 2 main things that I take away from when I did do wedding planning is patience and organization. And so staying on top of things so they don't fall through the cracks, having some type of organizational plan in place and making sure you're hitting all of the points, but also really listening to what people are asking for and listening when they're really not asking for things, and just kind of hearing through the track, hearing and listening, paying attention, reading between the lines about what they need as an organization, kind of sitting back a little bit and just paying attention has a lot to do with being a good HR manager, paying attention to the environment, listening to what people are saying, watching how certain situations are turning up. And I think those two things come from my wedding planning days, and empathy, it being a parent, comes into that. Just kind of trying to put yourself in their shoes, not just assuming that you know the answer, but trying to see it from their side of the fence so that you can come up with the best solution for everybody and not just assume that you think this is the best way it should happen.
What are you looking forward to with Onfleet in the coming year?
For me, it's really about learning. I have a goal of my own. I have career aspirations to eventually be a VP of HR and those kind of things. And how do I get there? And so that's the things that I think about. Okay, what do I need to do to increase not just my ability to step into that role, but also really learn and hone my own skills and my own education and background and things of that nature. And then really, when you truly think about scaling yourself along with scaling a company, it's not just about typical. And what I mean by that is when you scale with a company, you scale specifically for that company. So learning things that help me scale for Onfleet as well as beyond. So learning different areas, taking things from previous roles, previous experiences, and putting them in place today. Some things may or may not work for Onfleet, but who's to say that in, 15 years or whatever, that I'm not with Onfleet and I need to move on to a different organization. So I have to also hone skills that will allow me to be a chameleon and kind of roll with the punches with any organization that I join. And so as I'm learning here at Onfleet, I'm also trying to think big picture to make sure that I'm not just learning the Onfleet way, but I'm learning an HR way